before.
Yeah. I am Matt Erickson with Kingpilled. You can find me most often on Twitter at Real Kingpilled. That's where I dump all my thoughts and try to rile people up, I guess, sometimes. But then I've got a YouTube channel as well, the Kingpilled podcast. Just search Kingpilled on YouTube, and we've got some episodes we uploaded to podcatchers, so you can find that as well.
I'm gonna say you're one of those unique shows that you don't do a whole lot on the podcatchers. It's mostly just whatever's on YouTube, typically, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that's more because of my laziness / busyness, that I've got that extra step that I just haven't incorporated, and I can't. I got to take one for the team here. That's definitely not because people haven't reached out and offered to do it for me. I've had multiple people who have said, I will literally do it for you for free. And then I just never get around to setting it up with them. So
I may have been one of those about a year or so ago.
Yeah, you were.
What, you do this stuff? You do this stuff for free? Like what?
Only for certain special people.
Oh.
Well, that's like I do that with.
I don't have the sub count apparently for the freebies. I mean, Clint was
I do that
right.
with the morning show too. Like it's exclusively on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and I don't put it anywhere else. Like that's it. And it's which we do that as it's a morning news show is the intent of it. We don't always do news. But we always do it in the morning, and like that's the point is it's supposed to be a morning news show. So you should catch it either in the morning or later in the day. Get your news. Like I'm not putting it on a podcatcher for somebody to stick in a queue and listen to 3 weeks from now. That's not the purpose of the show. But that is the purpose of this show, and I appreciate those who are listening that waited 3 weeks to listen to this because I fall somewhere towards the back end of your list of must follows. So tonight, Jason, go ahead and introduce yourself since this is your first time on.
I'm Jason. I'm Jason from 2-Bit Podcast. It's a show about two old friends talking about things and stuff primarily, and occasionally we do get-togethers with other funny individuals like Justin and Matt for shows like Friend or Fed, which pisses off everybody, and that's fun. What else do we do? We do dissident roundtables, talking about fractals and other whatnots, which doesn't piss off people, which is also interesting. And that's basically it. And I have a 2-year-old daughter, which takes up most of my time. That's usually my handy excuse for my own laziness, like Matt. I primarily put stuff on YouTube. There's other episodes will appear in other places, occasionally, sporadically, because I'll be like, oh yeah, I should put that on BitChute and maybe Odyssey or Rumble. I think I have stuff on Rumble. I don't know how Rumble works. It's there though. And I think sometimes some stuff will appear on Spotify. I don't know. My problem is like I'm a Gen Xer, so like I'm that one stage away from Boomer. So it's like I know how to do a lot of these things, but I don't know how these things work. It's more like magic boxes where I just throw things in there. I'm like, I don't know. Are people watching? It's I guess I don't know. That's so. But anyways, honored to be here. Thank you very much. First time caller, long time listener. So
the interesting thing with like all the different platforms before we just dive into this, like I've put stuff on Odyssey, I've put stuff on BitChute. I have like 5 guys that exclusively watch this on Rumble, which I mean that's cool. So I keep it on Rumble just because I know that there are literally 5 guys who will not go watch this on YouTube because they absolutely hate everything that YouTube is, but they'll watch it on Rumble as long as it's there. So I keep stuff going on Rumble.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of not to extend this conversation too long, but it's been on my mind actually because Peter Thiel Rumble, right? So just to tie back to what we're going to be talking about today, I kind of look at it as like I have these fail safes. So if and when the show gets booted off YouTube, I'll just spend my time getting on Rumble or Rockfin or something else like that. Right now, as it stands, it's like YouTube and Twitter are still more valuable in terms of whatever that number is. One YouTube view is still, I think, worth at least 100 BitChute, Odyssey, Whizzle Wazzle views, because that's where people go to, and for whatever that's worth, you're far more likely to have impact on YouTube than you are on these other channels that you don't know really what that means. You know, they're ill-defined. So see, this is my reason. This is my reason why things don't get done. But yeah, and so I think having options and other places to go is valuable. At the same time, it's more like those are kind of backups, fail safes. You know, if everything else hits the fan, then do that. You know, but if a year from now Rumble is what they're saying and is going to replace YouTube or something like that, then we'll do Rumble. I don't know.
It has been cool that there have been some right-leaning or even sort of new right type of congressmen who have used Rumble for live streaming different events and stuff, like especially stuff that talked about the COVID regime, the science behind the vaccines, certain other stuff that like that YouTube is not going to let happen. So Rumble has been utilized for stuff like that. So that's been pretty cool. Like that could be the future of this. And speaking of those new right congressmen, there may be a chance that we'll see a couple more new right senators coming here in November. And we're going to talk about one of those guys tonight, and that is Blake Masters in Arizona. So initially, when I was looking at the Mother Jones hit piece that had come out about Masters, I thought it was really interesting and it warranted a conversation. I was a little late to seeing it. I guess it had been out for, when did this come out? It came out in July. So I guess maybe I wasn't too terribly late. I picked up on it late July, early August, and was wanting to take a look at it. And so at the time, I thought it was an interesting piece, especially because the way it's written, like it's clearly a hit piece. And then after that, before we had a chance to do an episode, he won his primary. And then the New York Times ran their own hit piece. And that one kind of confused me because when I read it, I was like, are y'all trying to make me like this guy more? Because you're really succeeding. Like, if the goal is to convince me that Blake Masters is like, going to help usher in the devil to run the country, you have completely convinced me of the opposite. Like he seems better and better the more I read through this article. So that gave us a little extra fuel for this, and now we're going to get around to it here just in time to see how these last really kind of home stretch months hit leading up to the general election. So which one do y'all want to start with, or what were your just kind of general thoughts on the articles themselves before we really start going into like nuts and bolts of what was said?
I'm about halfway through the what was it, Mother Jones one. I've read the New York Times one, and the New York Times one was it was very pearl clutchy. It was, which I mean, I guess I would expect, but it's strange to me. I don't read this type of stuff hardly ever. I read basically zero news articles, think pieces on any website. If I'm going to read something, it's going to be some like super niche blog or a book, and then I'm listening to it. So to sit down and just read through one of these articles here, it's like they have a really distinct voice that you can hear the author just sort of falls into a voice and a cadence as you go through it. And some of them are well written and some of them are just really kind of pretentious and stilted. And this one was much more the latter. It kind of felt like someone doing a parody of one of these articles. But on a more zoomed out level, I guess what's significant here is the level to which these guys are being evaluated. They're especially so like the one we're reading about here, Masters, they're digging deep to get stuff on him. They are going into the deepest reaches of the internet to try to find stuff to throw at him. And they're trying to keep it like, make it seem impartial. And like, they're just factually reporting, oh, there was this little thing that he did or this little thing. But it's like, you can tell by the stuff that they pick. Like, he had a freestyle rap that he did in college where, and like the specific line they pick out of it is the part where he criticizes political correctness. So it's kind of like, it's like they're just sort of laying this out as, hey, look, this is the type of guy he does. He does freestyle raps. But it has this like lecturing, like, how dare he freestyle about the no thing. Anyways, it was just,
and it's like,
it's weird to read this kind of thing.
Look at this really specific blog entry he wrote in 2008 about this, and look at how he's changed his opinion since then. It's like, so you're saying people aren't allowed to grow and have like
from college, you say?
Yeah, people aren't allowed to have personal development or anything, unless you're Joe Biden, in which case, if you sponsored the 94 crime bill, you're not just sponsored, like fucking wrote the 94 crime bill, but his opinions have changed on things. He's not all about that anymore. But Blake Masters, on the other hand, like, his opinions from college cannot have changed. Obviously, he still believes that. And
when Joe Biden said concrete jungle, what he really meant was gentrification. That's really what Joe Biden was. He was just ahead of his time, you see. He was talking future talk, Justin, and I don't think you appreciate that enough, or anyone does, really, except for Biden and his 34% support group. Yeah, so I mean, we can spend a little time on the writing of this. I did journalism. I did journalism. I dropped out of journalism school back in the late 90s. Not something that people actually really know that much about me.
Old.
Yeah, I know. And Humber School of Journalism, 1997, 98, something like that. And it was funny because reading through these things, it's just like these would be the articles they would have given you in journalism school back then, to say this is how you don't write these things. Like, this is how to not write anything. Don't do this. Because poorly written. The Mother Jones one, I think, is even worse than the New York Times one, because at least the New York Times one still has that pretense of it being a news article, so you can still see some sort of structuring to it. The Mother Jones thing is just all over the shop. I was reading it like, what's the? I mean, maybe, and this is an open question, because I think it's telling how these holdovers from the before times are still with us. And it doesn't seem to be responding to the reality of the situation. Like, reading both of these articles, I keep asking myself, who's this for? Is this because the Mother Jones, people who are reading Mother Jones, other than us reading it for content, are not going to vote for Blake Masters. They're not, like, there's no chance in hell that a Mother Jones subscriber or a New York Times person who pays to read the New York Times for anything else but pure ironic content is going to vote for Blake Masters or Trump or anything, right of Liz Cheney. So it's like, who is this for? Who is this shoring up? What is this? What's really going on here?
So that's part of the reason why. And I know there are ways to get it for free, but in January of every year, they run these dumb specials where you can get like super cheap subscription for the entire year. So it's just like, okay, cool, whatever, $5 for the Washington Post for the entire year. Okay, I'll do that. And then I get to look at all of the paywall locked Washington Post articles and see, like, what do these people actually think? Like, what are they talking to each other about and saying about this stuff? And that's why I have the New York Times and the Atlantic subscriptions, because like, I do sit around and read this stuff because I'm a dumbass, but also because like, I enjoy looking at what's the other side talking about and what are they saying about all of this stuff. Like, remember, so we did the Vanity Fair piece on the New Right. There was, what was the guy's name? Haig. Crap. Now I've drawn a blank. Carlos had him on. He was a really good interview with Carlos. I also chatted with him a little bit on Twitter leading up to Carlos's interview with him and us doing the review of his piece. Like, that was really well written, and that was very, it was very objective for all intents and purposes, especially for something in Vanity Fair, where like generally what you get from Vanity Fair is this Mother Jones piece. Like, that is 100% what I was expecting to see going into that, and it really wasn't at all.
Let me just jump in for a second, though. But Vanity Fair, and politics aside, Vanity Fair has had actually a really long history of hiring very, very good writers, like Christopher Hitchens. No matter how you feel about him, how we feel about him now, was a lead contributor. I think it was a lead editor actually of Vanity Fair for a while. So in terms of prestige and in terms of hiring good writers, Vanity Fair has a really good track record, oddly enough, right? Because for whatever reason we just don't connect those dots because of the covers or because of politics. But I think there's still holdovers left in these institutions. I don't think all of them have been hollowed out. The interesting thing is always about the editors, right? Because one thing that I think most people don't really realize about publications and media is the power really resides in the editors. The writers and some of that don't even kind of matter. It's who's editing and who's making these choices to how this thing is going to get presented. And if you still have some holdovers of people who at least have the pretense of journalistic integrity or writing that is above a fifth grade level, then you can start getting interesting things put out there that are challenging even within the confines of a bias. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that would explain why you do see some of these that do have better stuff. And I should probably pay more attention to names that are directly attached to some of these articles and stuff like that. So speaking of the Mother Jones piece, the author of this says that he had sent multiple requests to Blake Masters for interviews and a 24 point or 20. Well, how many points was it on his fact check list that he wanted a response from Masters on? I was like,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter for one thing, and for number two, like, dude, I've never even seen your name before. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's because I don't read a lot of Mother Jones, but like, I don't know who you are. So it would make sense that somebody who's getting a lot of national attention is probably not going to respond to you.
I love the fact that he also said he send the same thing to Peter Thiel, and it's like, yeah, Peter Thiel, the guy who avoids contact with the media like a fucking plague, like who probably took your request and used it as like literally got it printed out on velvet to use as toilet paper. Like it's like, no, of course he didn't respond to you. He doesn't respond to any. He sank Gawker for fuck's sake. Like, what do you think his relationship with the media is?
I was really interested reading some of his. Like, I knew he had a libertarian background, that I'd heard that he'd been like on libertarian blogs and that sort of thing, but I didn't really know much about where he was actually coming from. I've heard a decent bit from Tho Bishop. Tho has done a good job of kind of raising his profile into our circles, but I thought this was interesting from the New York Times article. So he's 35. So it says at 19 he blogged on LiveJournal under the username King GPS in support of drug legalization, unfettered immigration, and the elimination of the Supreme Court, which, he wrote, is, quote, little more than a coercive microcosm of democracy. As for national borders, Mr. Masters wrote, are we really supposed to believe that a government can draw a line in the sand and that the people living on one side are somehow inherently different or deserving of more or less rights than those on the other? And it goes on to just talk about some of his other stuff he talked about. But he recommended, this in 2007, he recommended reading antiwar.com, the Mises Institute website, LouRockwell.com, and Counterpunch. So that's an interesting progression there so at 19, that would have been in like 2004, 2005. And from that point to then here 2 or 3 years later, he is now recommending LouRockwell.com and Counterpunch. And then he's progressing to the point where let's see here. Sorry, I got the wrong tab open. He gets to the point where once like Mitt Romney's election rolls around, 2012, now he's very clearly expressly right wing, and he's like feeling disenchanted with the Republicans for being squishes. So that progression is very interesting to me because I mean, number one, it mirrors the progression of, I think, a lot of people who see themselves in the dissident right-wing sphere now. There was a time where we had this kind of socially liberal, fiscally conservative kind of like libertarianism, neither left nor right. And like we have all these rational arguments laid out in our heads, anti-borders and, pro-choice, all these different things. But he's gone from being like completely full ANCAP on immigration to very anti-immigration. He's gone from pro-choice to pro-life. He's gone from pro-gay marriage to anti-gay marriage to the point where he'll say in public that he thinks that Peter Thiel's marriage should be illegitimate. The guy has made a serious transition, and he's clearly very well read. He's very intelligent, and the guy's got physiognomy like a mofo. He is just the like absolute. You can see him carved into a marble bust already. He has got the most amazing features. He looks like a Caesar. But that, to me, that makes me trust him a lot more. Number one, knowing that that's his background, knowing that he progressed. You don't make the progression that he has made if you're easily influenced or like not like you're a guy that's for sale. Those two things aren't coherent to me. I don't think that you can have the intellectual progression he's had and also be like easily bought off and an opportunist and someone who's just going to naturally get watered down by kind of participating with the system. But the bigger concern to me, and this is what I thought might be kind of interesting to discuss here, is particularly having a past with Peter Thiel. And there was a quote in the Mother Jones one of his old slogans. You guys remember that part? Here we go.
The one he took off of, it was attributed to Thiel, but
yeah,
it was actually from a RPG or something like that. Yeah.
On his Tumblr, Masters had adopted a new tagline so Thielian that it is still sometimes misattributed to the billionaire. Quote, "Your mind is software, program it. Your body is a shell, change it. Death is a disease, cure it. Extinction is approaching, fight it." And it said it was from a sci-fi RPG in which bioengineered humans in a post-apocalyptic universe try to save transhumanity from extinction by joining a, quote, secretive conspiracy. So, to what extent is the Thiel sphere, which is, I think, he's probably the headliner at this point, to what extent is the Thiel sphere just the right wing, or maybe you could say the right arm of the World Economic Forum, Great Reset, yada, yada, yada? Is this the other part of the dialectic?
I had the exact same thought. Early on, Matt, and long before we started communicating, when I became just kind of aware of you with Kingpilled, one of the things I loved about your show was that it made me feel smart, because it was like, because a lot of times I'd be having a thought, like let's say on a Monday, and I listen to your show on a Wednesday, I'm like, oh, it's the same thing. We're traveling parallel paths here. And I had the exact same thought over the last 48 hours. And this it's kind of been building on other things I've been thinking of. I've been reading Seraphim Rose, specifically his book about nihilism. And it made me think of a conversation I think we were having on the Discord at some point, where Father Seraphim talks about, I forget who he was talking about. It wasn't Evola, it was the other guy whose name I forget right now. Yes, saying that Guinan is not wrong, he just doesn't go far enough. Mm-hmm. And reading Evola, I had the same feeling. It's like, what I found really interesting is how Evola goes into Eastern mysticism to extract into what he would call a traditionalism, which is not just an Evola term, but I think he makes it he makes the most salient point for it, let's say. And he goes into, he's using Buddhism and he's using Dharmaism and all these other things, and for whatever reason they seem to have skipped orthodoxy, or Christian orthodoxy. And I think maybe a lot of this has to do with the German mind, because they were already in Protestantism. They were already in some sort of rejection of Christianity. So everything that was in the Christian sphere had to be rejected to something much more extreme, and that would lead them into other roads, which anyone reading nihilism, which I highly recommend, no matter what your religious background is. Father Seraphim kind of ties it up into what he calls vitalism, that all these strains are actually tied to a sort of a positive nihilism that's been with us. This is Gen 3. This is Genesis 3. This is what, when we get into conversations about Gnosticism and all that stuff, all these things are placeholders for this energy, for this spirit that invades these systems and wears them like a meat suit. So to go to your point, Matt, it's like, yes, I think we're at a point now. The tipping point has already been made. We're into a new paradigm, and the new paradigm is going to be transhumanism, technocrat, some sort of technocratic something. That is now, I think, inevitable, unless things completely fall apart, and then whatever, right? But if all things remain the same, we're going to get some version of that. The question now is, and Tommy and LB brought this up, and I'm getting to something. Don't worry. This is my thought process. Sorry, folks, for encountering this for the first time. But go watch a Federal Feds. We do 6 hours, not because I'm concise. But LB and Tommy mentioned this in Tommy's last podcast, where she's like, are we seeing the birth of a new parallel system? And in that parallel system, is it this new war of elites, which is like Peter Thiel and his folks, even Elon Musk, are on one side, and WEF and Prince Charles and all the other people are on the other? And is it a war to see who comes out supreme, or is it a war to see who can split? Is this the real civil war? That's the question, I think, that comes.
That's an interesting rabbit hole to go down, because especially when you look at, well, when you look at Elon Musk and some of the things that he's said and done over the last several years, like he was a leftist darling for many years there, and then just over the last 2 or 3 years, he's really become kind of their heel. And then you got Thiel, which with all of his background and the things that he's been a part of, and like where he's made his money. I wouldn't necessarily consider any of those necessarily like overtly conservative ventures. And if you look at some of the things that Jeff Bezos has said and kind of done over the last 2 or 3 years, especially, he's sort of moved in a similar direction.
This is the big question, right? So the big question is this: look, there's just those 3 figures, right? Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Jeff Bezos. They've built their careers, and in fact, pretty much their entire industry relies on government subsidies, right? They're tied to the government. DARPA, Peter Thiel is setting up subsidiaries that are like, to say, parallels to BlackRock, parallels, if you go through the Mother Jones thing, it's not like he's made his money supporting groups that are definitely Fed friendly, if not actual Feds. So they're taking an enormous risk, and that's where my interest lies. Because if these guys who are not known for taking outsized risks, who built their career not taking they take business risks, but not life risks. They're taking a massive risk to make a delineation of what side they're on. And you'd have those 3 guys, just those 3 guys, have more wealth than most countries have GDP. So the fact that they're making a move and it's becoming more and more obvious is very interesting. And I think it's like, what, which way Western man is going to be is not going to be just a meme. It's going to be a reality. It's like, well, what side are you going to be on?
I've been thinking about, kind of for a while, the ideas of Blue Caesar and Red Caesar, and I just finished reading the book by Michael Anton, where he kind of actually, I think I've got like an hour left in the audiobook. I had to skip through large chunks of it just because Michael Anton's still got quite a bit of BoomerCon going on, and just kind of trying to choke down all the lauding of the founding fathers just got kind of tiresome because like I've gotten to the point now where I see the founding fathers as like the Antifa of their day, and so it just makes it. Anyways, the thought I've been having about this is, I think a lot of people, they imagine, you kind of get people who imagine one of two things. It's really kind of the red Caesar, blue Caesar archetype. Some people say, you know, it's going to be the red Caesar. He's going to be like the reincarnation of Saint Constantine the Great, who's gonna he's just basically going to make everything right. He's going to be essentially like a Deus Ex Machina who comes in and just kind of swoops in and saves the day. It's sort of a more watered down version of the Patriots are in control, kind of. And then on the flip side, you have the blue Caesar, where you have the concern that it's going to be some type of a like communist dictator who takes over and yada yada yada. And I'd say that most people fall probably not quite as extreme on the red Caesar side. The people who actually have these kind of conversations, they're not as extreme on the red Caesar side, but they still are kind of locked into that red Caesar, in order to be a good thing, has to fit all of these predefined categories. He has, and most of all, he has to be a rabid ideologue who is simpatico with all of us, who recognizes the regime for what it is, who's a devout Christian, yada, yada, yada. And I think that would be great. That would be phenomenal. That obviously that would be best case scenario. But I don't think that it necessarily has to be that way to still be a good thing. And I don't think it's likely that it's going to be the reincarnation of St. Constantine the Great. I think that you're the type of person who's going to wind up taking this red Caesar role. And I do think it's going to be a red Caesar when it happens. Number one, they're not going to come through the president, the office of the presidency. I don't think that doesn't seem to make sense at all. And I also don't think that they're going to be taking over the empire. I don't think that they're going to start out as someone who is a direct threat to the empire itself. I think they're going to start off as something akin to like a DeSantis type of character who's gained a foothold in a key state and makes the right political moves to retain his hold on that and essentially lock down his power while the rest of the regime has too many issues to really deal with him or something like that. But really, this is kind of a long lead up to the one point that I really wanted to get to, which is that I'm becoming more and more confident that whoever Red Caesar becomes is not going to look like Red Caesar at first. And that's going to be in large part because to get to the position where he could become Red Caesar, he's going to have ingratiated himself to the regime. He's going to have to be operating on the regime's playing field to some degree. He's likely someone like DeSantis. I could see, I don't think it's going to be DeSantis, but someone like him where people are like, oh, he's a Fed, you know, he's got his background of military intelligence and you know, he's pro-Israel and all these other things. In order to get into a foothold in power right now, you essentially have to have something on the record where you have been playing ball with the regime, where you have received some kind of great award, or you've frontlined some kind of big accomplishment, or you're preaching the regime rhetoric. And I think that people who are wanting an ideologue to lead them out of the wandering in the wilderness, I think you're not going to find him. I think what you're going to wind up with is a pragmatic opportunist who jumps at the opportunity and then kind of backfills his ideological awakening in the process of obtaining power.
So this is taking an interesting turn, and I love it. Something that I was thinking about with that, and have been thinking about quite a bit. I have said multiple times, like I've been saying since I was in high school, that we are witnessing the collapse of the Roman Empire in our modern era, and which is kind of a two-sided thing. Like we are witnessing like late stage the empire collapsing, but we're also getting to watch kind of the middle phases where Caesar comes to power, and so you get like those years of stability, and honestly, for the Roman Empire, it's hundreds of years of stability. Where I don't know that it will last that long for the U.S. Just based on the current trajectory, and maybe technology just speeds things up naturally. where that sort of thing is concerned. Like when I was in high school, I was saying I thought like 75 years we would see the full collapse, and 20 years later, I'm thinking like maybe 10, if even that long. So it's
6
really kind of depending on the day, yeah. So it's really kind of sped up. But like one of the things that I've been kind of thinking about, and on the talking points of DeSantis is like, if you look at Roman history, you have Julius Caesar, who is not like the great leader of the empire, right? Like he doesn't necessarily come to power out of a desire for it. He comes to it out of a necessity for it, because they push him to that point that what else is he going to do, right? And he also is the DeSantis type figure in that he has been a part of that unit. Like he is known, he is trusted, like he is somebody that has been within as well as now being pushed without. And that's where DeSantis, I mean, granted, he's never been truly like within the way Julius Caesar was, but he's had that similar trajectory of having been a part of it to being pushed out of it, and being kind of forced into a position of having to do things his way. So then that kind of brings me to like, okay, you've got him and whoever it is that's like the Julius of our era, they're going to be the one that kind of like punches the whole thing in the face and resets stuff. But who's going to be the one that comes after that like actually brings on the Augustus era, where you get to have some peace and prosperity for a time, and see the empire start to have some success again and kind of level itself out and get some level of stability where they can get the elites on. I don't necessarily think it's on the right track, but on a less wrong track to be successful.
Let me just jump in here real quick, because this actually is pitching to an idea I was just thinking about yesterday. So I think oftentimes when we talk about Roman history and we are making these allusions, there's something missing here, because we keep talking about taking power, that you have to be able to take power. Julius Caesar didn't take power. He just realized he had it. Like he woke up one day and realized that because the Senate had become weakened by their own corruption and had broken so many of their own promises, that he was sitting with one of the most powerful, experienced, battle-hardened legions in all of Rome, who had just been screwed out of their promises for land ownership. And he used that and said, well, fuck it, we're going to Rome because I have the power. Like, he just woke up one day and said, I mean, I'm using that as a illustrative narrative, but it's like waking up one day and going, oh, no, I have the power all along. I have all this power. And they don't. So I'm going to just use it. I'm not taking it. It's there. I already have it. So the question really is going to become, and I think that's more likely, Charlemagne did the exact same thing. Charlemagne didn't take power from the Pope. He just said, I have the power. You don't. You're going to do what I say, because if you don't, you're fucked. And that's it. End of conversation. That has been the consistent kind of narrative as we see through great men of time. Putin's doing the exact same thing right now, right? The reason why I said this very early on when Putin was doing those speeches, and it seemed to be against the West, and it seemed to be directed to the West. And the empire of lies and that kind of thing. The first takeaway I had when those speeches was that he's not talking to the West. He's signaling to his in-group. And his in-group is the BRICS nations. And his in-group is other Eastern Europeans living in like the Eurozone. And he's telling them directly, he's like, look, which way? Like, which way are you going to go? Because I'm offering this and they're offering that. And this is all there is. Like, there is no third path. There is no other option. And I have power, and I'm going to use it. And watch me use this power. And it's what he's done consistently over the last 6 months. I still, just to sort of go into Putin land for a second, I'm still amazed. I'm having these conversations with people where I'm like, he's going to win this thing. And they're like, no, he's not. Ukraine's going to launch this offense. I'm like, okay. Like, want to take? I took a bet with one of my friends, one of my blue-pilled friends. I'm like, oh, give it 6 months. We'll see where we're at, because he's using power, and he's using the power that he already has. He doesn't take it; he has it. He has power over. He has energy power, and he's using it. So, in the American context, I think in this, I don't know if Peter Thiel and co. have that ambient power sitting in their lap. I'm kind of thinking they do. And I think they do because they have both a psychological edge and a monetary edge. They're creating a parallel society, a parallel mimetic, creating parallel mimesis, which in a civil war scenario, in a fifth gen warlike scenario, doesn't mean it has to get kinetic. It means that we can have a let's say a national divorce without a divorce, where you can actually have a parallel society operating under one veil. And that, I think, is much more likely to happen, because, and it won't even come down to states' rights. It's going to manifest itself in many other metaphysical ways, because we're dealing with actual metaphysics. So my complaint about Peter Thiel and all the rest of them, and I don't know really where their heads are at, but it's like, yes, you're here, but you're not going far enough. Like, there's a point with Masters, which I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And there's a missing point, which maybe, and I'm just going to add this on and see where you go with this, because it's the other thing I'm having that's going on in my mind, is that the more I'm reading Rose and Church Fathers from an Orthodox perspective, the more that I'm trying to make my worldview, my nous, and everything about me into orthodoxy, the less I want them to be orthodox. I don't want Masters to be orthodox. I don't want this system to become orthodox at all. I want them to pursue their means. I want their materialists to be materialist. I want them to continue on, and I hope that they don't just come from my child, like, or else we're going to have to go to war, and then whatever, right? I'm prepared to do that. I'm fine with that. I'm good with God. So, but I don't want them to take this stuff, because I don't want them there, because it's not for them. And I think that's the next step for us. And I know, Matt, you're nodding your head, and because I know this is where our thought process is going, where it's like, look, you can have the world, right? The world is a fallen place. Be fallen, have the world. Be in this world, but not of it. And that is our creed. Is like, I'm now divorcing myself more and more and more from the expectations and the results of this thing, where it's like, yes, I will support those who I do not think are in opposition or in conflict with my future, with my children. But other than that, I don't care, man. Like, have at it.
Well, we're starting to see that. I mean, we're starting to see here in the States some of that divorce without the divorce without the true divorce, like, coming to fruition.
Separation without divorce.
There we go. That's the one. It's funny. I did that for some years. Anyway, like New York and the governor, Kathy, what's her face, saying that, like, if you're a MAGA Republican, you should get out of the state because we don't want you here. California. Perfect. and Gavin Newsom putting out the ads, like, basically pitching California to Floridians. Like, those ads are not targeted at DeSantis supporting Floridians. They're talking. Those are exclusively talking to the people who feel like they are trapped in some, like, red state hell and need to get out. He's saying, hey, come to us. While at the same time, like, the people who feel like they're trapped in a blue state hell are fleeing California and going to Texas. Now, granted, some of those
want the freedom to shit on the street? Come over here. You can shit over here. Look, you can shit over here. You can shit over here. Look at this spot. This spot has no shit in it. Shit over here, please.
And if you're really concerned about it, there's an app that will tell you where the shit is. So you can go find a spot where there is no shit, and then you can just add it into the app that you've shit here. And now everybody knows that that's your shit spot. Don't go shit there.
There's the blue space thing where it's like you'll get fined for not picking up your dog shit if you walk your dog on the street and your dog takes a shit on the ground, you'll be fine for not picking up your dog shit. But you could, if you're of a certain persona, you could take a shit right next to it and not get fined. So it's like maybe that's a trade-off, right? Like you can you can shit everywhere you want, just not your animals.
They need to start doing something like identifying as their animal and it's taking a shit, and it's like when they're taking a shit. No, this is just I'm just shitting for my dog.
I'm my other kin self is speaking for me, sir, and I.
It's just be like, we're homeless and this is my child. He identifies as a human child. I know it looks like a 4-legged animal, but it's actually my human child. I identify him that way, and it's okay because we're homeless, so he can shit here. Like you can't fine us for this. You gotta find them loopholes, man.
Yeah, sure. You might think I'm selling fentanyl to 15-year-olds, but what I'm really doing is selling fentanyl to 15-year-olds. Bigot.
Yeah, the separation idea, like to me, it's just kind of, it's very clear that it's inevitable that there's going to be some kind of a breakup, whether it's literal, formal, like is legally inscribed somewhere that the breakup happened, or if it's just functional, where the states just begin operating separately. I think where you're really going to start recognizing it when it's coming to pass is when people start cutting losses, where they're like, fuck it, I don't, sunk cost is a sunk cost and we just need to part ways. I think that's kind of the trajectory. It's going to wind up some way along those lines. I thought it was interesting. One thing I learned in one of these pieces, I don't remember which one it was that Peter Thiel spent a lot of time in South Africa as a child. I hadn't known that. And so that means that he and Musk both have a personal interest in what's going on down there. Now, neither one of them really talks about it, so I don't know that it's immediately on their radar. But knowing both of those guys, I'm sure it's immediately on their radar. I'm sure they're tracking it. They're keeping an eye on it. So that's just kind of another thing that goes into... like people that try to write Musk off as just being some kind of like idiot opportunist or just kind of like a mercenary or something like that. The guy runs a lot deeper than that for me. I think that there's a lot more deliberate strategy going on. I don't necessarily think he's pulling all the strings, but I just can't get rid of this thought that he and Peter Thiel are both closely personally acquainted. They've done a lot of business together, and they both are flirting around the fringes of this kind of activity. But all of that being said, like I think that it's silly to see all of this and think that the angle that you need to take here is trying to wrestle hold of the whole system and trying to redirect it in one way or the other, whether it's dissolving the federal government or whatever. Like, just let the thing fall apart and just start positioning yourself, angling yourself to take control of the pieces as the pieces break off. Like it's like a gigantic iceberg, and it's going to eventually, little pieces are going to break off of the main sheet, and just position yourself to be ready that as soon as the piece starts to break off, you push yourself away and you start paddling as fast as you can.
So to that point, what sort of in the New York Times piece, I think I'm almost 100% positive it was the New York Times piece. It talks about that Peter Thiel and Masters both had some level of position within the Trump administration early on, and they had attempted to push the Trump administration to actually carry through with the draining the swamp. Like let's not just take little baby steps. Like let's go fuck the whole thing up. Like don't just put these people who are a little less terrible than the last guy, but put this person who's going to be completely radical in the other direction. Like really piss people off, really go in and just overturn the system, fuck the whole thing up, legitimately drain the swamp, and give them something that they've never seen before and never expected. And it was too radical for the Trump administration, and they didn't do any of it. And so then when you get from the Trump administration what you get, whereas it's basically just status quo with spicy tweets. And I mean, there were some things that he did.
I think that idea fell apart because of participation. Like, remember when Trump first took office? I think this is kind of what they're alluding to. It was that they had that sort of Trump said, "I want this committee of this round table of elites, basically of minds, to help inform me on policy." I think Elon Musk was there, Peter Thiel was there, a few others were there, right? And it slowly just kind of fell apart because the pressure they were putting on Trump made it so that no one wanted very few people wanted their name associated with it. I remember Elon Musk broke ranks with it very early on. Everyone else was, and it was all the excuses were like sort of like, blah, 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 right?
Well, like the way the Times piece talks about it is that, like Masters and Thiel, they were too radical for the group. Like they wanted to do things that would legitimately piss people off, and rightly so. Like that's what the administration should have done if they were going to be effective. But it was just so far to that side of like really trying to flip the status quo that it pushed people, like turn people kind of against them. So like have they learned lessons from that, and in these, especially looking at like Masters and JD Vance and their campaigns in winning their primaries and going into these the general elections for the Senate positions they're running for, and the other dozen or so candidates that Thiel has backed. And if I'm not mistaken, I think all of them made it through their primaries and are moving to the general election in November. So like, have they learned some lessons from that? From like that early kind of failure, I guess, in the Trump administration to taking a different approach now?
I mean, right now he's tied. I think isn't Masters tied in Arizona? He's like the polling is like 45 to 47%. So within like error range. You might as well just call it dead heat. I know a lot of libertarians are trying to take credit, saying, "Oh, we're the deciding vote between the two." Like, okay, yeah, your 2% is really going to make the big difference. Really, like it's okay, sure.
The JD Vance race is equally, it's like 2% different or something like that. And really, when you think about the way that the polls are structured, they're like the polls are intended to coach people into how to vote. So if they show as a dead heat, then probably Vance and Masters are, assuming a legitimate election, are probably ahead right now.
I was going to say, generally speaking, if you just look at typical polling and the way they kind of pull the polls, if they are polling roughly even, that means they're probably anywhere from 6 to 8 points ahead. If you're being completely honest, and it's not, there's
especially races like that are very important.
Yeah.
The guy I turn to a lot for that kind of stuff is Sticks and Hammer. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's sort of like he's a bit of a legacy YouTuber. I don't agree with all of his stuff and blah 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 blah, but his analysis usually on the political level and he dissects polls, I think, better than anyone else. He's done it consistently. I've tuned into him before around 2014. He seems pretty consistent. Going, he's a bit. He's our kind of autist, where he's like he's just going to go systematically through like Rasmussen, all these other polling systems. For me, I'm a Canadian who's living in Australia, so really, a lot of this stuff to me is just brain candy. Like it's popcorn. I don't care. Like it's not going to affect my life that much, really. I mean, downstream we could talk about downstream Western effects, but in media effects it doesn't matter to me. So a lot of my consumption of this is more masturbatory in some senses. It's like I just kind of want to see one side win, lose, because fuck them. But I think what's maybe this is where we can turn this conversation is that Peter Thiel is a student of Girard. So is Elon Musk. In the Mother Jones thing, I'll just make this quote, where they quote Girard without quoting Girard. The most revealing thing of Thiel's 19 lectures, though, was Masters' favorite, Founders as victim founders victim, founder as God. Thiel told students that ancient societies resolved internal tensions by scapegoating founder-like figures who were often worshipped before being sacrificed, a circumstance that startup leaders also risked. Monarchy, Thiel speculated, might have arisen when scapegoats figured out how to become kings and avoid the sacrificial altar. Wearing the crown is obviously an attractive thing, Thiel said. The question is whether you can decouple it without getting executed. He concluded with a plea on behalf of the would-be techno kings willing to break the rules. Maybe they are in some key way the most important, Thiel said. Maybe we should let them off the hook. Now, this is an important paragraph in a few ways. One, it just highlights how Mother Jones is like, this writer is complete shit. Like, there's no point in that fucking paragraph. I don't know where to glom on. No, I'm serious. Like, mentally, where I'm like, what am I supposed to extract from this paragraph? Nothing. However, because I'm a little bit of a student of Girard, this to me is very revealing. It's also kind of a, I don't know where the misreading is here, because I haven't read these notes. If Thiel is getting that out of the scapegoat mechanism, he's getting something wrong. What I think is going on, and what the adverse effect of Trump and Trump-like figures is a modeling issue. What the left and what the WEF and all those other guys do not want is rivalrous models. They want a congruous model of everyone following. They want everyone to model Obama. They want Obama to be sort of, or Obama-like kind of figures to be the model, and everyone to kind of get behind that and just follow that. That's what they want. Having derivations off to the side of any other models needs to be excluded. So when they scapegoat Trump, it's not to just get rid of his side. It's to make sure that no one else models the Trump method, which they failed. And now you're seeing a million Trumps. Like, this goes to where Michael Malice once said that Trump isn't the flood, he's the dam. If you get rid of the dam, now you have the flood. And now you have the flood of all these other people who are going to start taking these elements and modeling them. And when that modeling happens, God knows where you get, right? You're creating this new parallelism, which is, I think, to a globalist order, the main enemy. Like, that's the thing they don't want. They don't want options. They do not want a counter narrative. They only want one thing. And sorry,
you just gave me a whole bunch of thoughts. So thank you. We were talking just before this about the them showing up with Trump's transition team, and then just realizing that they were kind of on the outs. They were way too extreme. And it's like, it's difficult to remember what it was like in 2016. 2016 was 2017, technically, with the transition team. It was a very different, incredibly different time. There is stuff that's out in the mainstream now that was not even comprehensible back then. I mean, like, you don't get someone like Charles Haywood winding up on Tucker Carlson 6 years ago. That just doesn't, like, and that's a mild example. That's just the first thing that comes to mind. So when they saw this coming, they're like, okay, maybe this is our opportunity. We've bottomed out with Obama. They're just coming fresh off of Ferguson and all of that. They're like, all right, this is the bottom. We've hit the bottom. And now we've got Brexit. We've got Trump. This is where the tides are turning. So they're jumping on this. The startup guys see this as an investment opportunity. Let's go invest in this market. And as soon as they got into it, they realized, all right, this market isn't what we thought it was. We're pulling out our investments, and we're going to go back and reconfigure this startup. And now we've gathered all of this data, and then they've spent the last 6 years or whatever watching how the market has been evolving. Gradually, we're getting an apocalypse here. We're getting a revealing of the method where you're seeing the actual reality of what's going on behind the scenes. You're seeing how the system works.
All things hidden shall be revealed.
Yes. And these guys are the startup gurus. These are and they're connected with, you could see one of the guys that they recommended was for the head of the FDA was Balaji Srinivasan, big startup guy, very close with Naval Ravikant, big startup guy. There was another person as well. You've got Tim Ferriss is directly connected with those people, and a lot of those types of people. There are a ton of startup, big money type guys in the God damn it, Trey. There are a bunch of people in Silicon Valley who are very much sympathetic to this line of reasoning. I mean, you've got the Yarvin. Yarvin has been a household name in Silicon Valley for a while now. People have been very keenly aware of him. He's tapping into a sentiment that's already there. But as I think Jason, it was one of you guys said, like, they didn't want their names associated. There was people who didn't want their names associated with Trump because of who he was, but not just who he was, but when he was. The social cost of being associated with Trump in 2017, 2018, 2019 was tremendous. But the system has changed. It has adjusted. The culture has shifted dramatically. You can now endorse, like we're on the frickin' New York Times and they're just kind of in passing mentioning, oh yeah, this guy's a big fan of the Unabomber. We're at that point where what has become cancelable material in public has changed significantly. So that's going to lower the cost for a lot of these other types of people to get into the system.
The Vanity Fair piece about the new right referred to the Unabomber as Uncle Ted.
Yes, that's right. Right. Yes. So
I which I took as a personal victory.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So that's one of the things that
if you meme it, they will come.
That's one of the things that I kind of find really interesting about these pieces, is they talk about some of these like figures and people.
They're normalizing,
right?
Models'
like
behavior.
Curtis Garvin,
models' behavior are way more powerful than any other psyop in invention. Like the one thing that the bitter white pill is. So I'm sorry, Justin, to cut you off. It's your show. I should shut the fuck up. But the bitter white pill that I keep experiencing is that all these people are human too. So if you go back to one of the earliest stuff Mark and I were talking on the 2-bit podcast thing that we do, we kind of came up with this concept of grace. And once my child becomes no longer 2 years old, I will write these things down. But grace, I created this. I didn't create it. We were formalizing this concept of material grace, which is a combination of faith, forgiveness, and mercy. And I just forgot where I was going with this. I'm coming to it. Shit, no, I just lost it. Fuck.
Grace, forgiveness, and mercy.
Grace, forgiveness, mercy. We talked about that to get to talk amongst yourselves. I'll think about it. Sorry, okay. I just totally lost that train of thought.
The thought that I'd had before that I was trying to drive at, maybe it'll remind you, is that what I'm seeing now is that the startup guys are now have their sights set on a new market, and they're approaching it like it's a market for investment. And from the perspective of a libertarian, what better could it be that now you have people who are treating government like it's a business that you invest in? This is like the first step toward privatization. You've got the startup guys, like they're the guys, Thiel and Musk and Masters, and some of these guys are the ones who have the insulation within the system to put their necks on the line and be the first people to attach their name to these kinds of movements. Them doing that establishes the baseline for people to follow them. Now there is less social cost to be running a campaign that's explicitly talking about overthrowing the existing structure of the US government and replacing it with something completely new. That's being openly discussed and talked about in a Senate campaign. And these articles, like Mother Jones and New York Times and stuff, they read to me like a cry for help. Like these people are recognizing that these are forces that they don't control, and they're trying to use the same old weapons and the same old tactics against them. But in doing so, they're amplifying them. They're giving them power. They're normalizing them so that now you're going to get additional money, additional resources, additional investment, additional eyeballs coming from the cohorts of these guys who before weren't willing to put their name and put their money on the line, but now are like, fuck it. Let's go. Let's get this started.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is like Curtis Yarvin is becoming almost a household name in these like progressive, more woke journalistic ventures. Like I have seen Curtis Yarvin mentioned now in Mother Jones, the New York Times multiple times, the Washington Post multiple times, Vanity Fair, the Atlantic, like all of the left-leaning big publications. I am seeing his name, and the really crazy thing about it is, and maybe I need to go back and probably listen to the Friend or Fed Yarvin episode of 2-Bit Podcast, but maybe it is some sort of a controlled opposition type thing, but not all of these situations where his name is being brought up are necessarily in a negative light. Like they try to twist it that way, but the way that all of them twist it that way is by attaching it to Trump. And when you, especially for anybody, not that I think that a lot of the typical readership of any of these publications are really all that intellectually curious, but if they are even minutely intellectually curious, they're going to go and they're going to look at like the new right, and they're going to find what Jonathan Hogue found when he wrote that Vanity Fair piece, was that a lot of that new right is not really Trumpian. They are something completely different. And whenever there were people at these kind of very select inclusive meetings that were getting together and having conversations and stuff, whenever somebody would get up there and be like really Trumpy rah rah and like MAGA MAGA MAGA, they'd get a very lukewarm response, if even that good. So like this is it's a different thing. Like the USA Today made a huge deal about the Trump endorsement of JD Vance, and having read and kind of looked into Vance quite a bit prior to that, I didn't see it as being a thing. Like Trump saddled his horse to that wagon, not the other way around. Like that wasn't JD Vance getting the Trump endorsement. That was Trump giving the endorsement so it would look like he was successful by proxy. And like that's a lot of what's going on in the new right. And I think by all of these different publications pointing to all of these different figures consistently, they're putting people on the radar of a lot of readers who otherwise wouldn't be seeing that. And honestly, I mean, for the majority of them, it probably just makes them feel even more pissed off towards the right. But there's going to be a percentage that have read the Atlantic since, I don't know, since the fucking like 70s, because it was a respectable, journalistic venture, who have read the New York Times forever, who have read the Washington Post forever, because they are respectable, they're respectable newspapers.
And they've worn out the buzzwords. So attaching the buzzwords to them for these people is going to be meaningless. And if anything, is going to make them more interested. You're going to be like, well, if they're calling him racist and sexist, then he must be saying something interesting.
Well, okay, so to go back to it, I think I've figured out my thread with the Grace thing, is that it's the idea of injecting these ideas into this ever-developing zeitgeist. Because the model, and I'll see how you guys feel about this, because I think a lot of this Caesar talk verges on cope, right? It's like when Queen dies, King Charles III is anointed. Everyone kind of gets excited until we kind of look into what Charles is all about, and you're like, this is not a good idea. This is not good. This is not. You have a WEF king. Enjoy. the idea is this: is that JD Vance, Masters, all these guys, Thiel, have a lot more in common with each other than they do with us. And I'm calling, so I make the distinction between, like, let's say, the elites and the Hammerneggers. I'm in the Hammerneggers crowd. I'm my job, my day-to-day job is as a groundskeeper at a daycare. I drive a tractor. My relationship to any of these people is theoretical at best. They do not speak for me. They're not of me. They're not ever going to be of me. The best we can hope for is that they're going to leave me the fuck alone, or allow me to exist in a way that give me rules that I can go, okay, I can operate in those rules. This is kind of what I can always bring back to the Singapore example, and Singapore is brought up in both these articles quite a bit. Is that I would prefer a Singapore model, not because of the Singapore model per se, but I would prefer having a system that says these are the rules. You can do this or you can do that, and if you do this, this is what happens. Like, I would much prefer that. I think this is where people default to monarchy, and I'm really interested in hearing what you guys have to say about this, because I think there's a lot of copium with the Caesar thing where we're looking for a savior outside of a system. And again, maybe I didn't voice this properly, or I'm still trying to figure this out. In my own personal world, I'm moving towards an orthodox point of view, which is like I'm divorcing myself to a greater degree from the materialistic whatever happens. At the same time, I'm tethered to it, and I understand that my day-to-day condition is going to be affected by it. So I am interested in it. Obviously, I do want to affect it if I can. So then the question is, okay, whatever that thing is, whatever that Caesar is, whatever that new model will become, that's our job, is to kind of try to influence that in any way we can.
Yes.
But that thing is beyond us.
Yes.
It's not going to be us. It's never going to be. It's never going to reflect us or be a one-to-one of us. And to try to make it that is not only just a fool's errand, it's suicidal. Like, it's a waste of energy.
Yeah, that was a really well way of saying what I was trying to say earlier, talking about the
really, because I stumbled the fuck through that.
Yeah, no, that made it really clarified it for me what I was trying to say. That essentially, if you're looking at, like, the reason people are honed in on the Caesar is because they've recognized this pattern throughout history that in these kinds of times, you could call it a Bonaparte or a Charlemagne. Like, in times when this historical cycle comes around, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And so the rhyme means that there's going to be some significant figurehead who steps in and essentially builds the new civilization out of the ashes of the prior one. And so then the question, it's really a matter of who is that going to be, and how is he going to do it? What's his like, what color is he going to be, so to speak? And what you really hit on what I was trying to say, which is that if you think that guy has to agree with you on everything or has to represent your perspective, then yeah, that's cope. That Caesar is not going to show up. That's never how that Caesar shows up. It just, that type of, your ideology doesn't lend itself to Caesarism. What you're looking for is an enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of situation. That's how this kind of thing works its way out. There's going to be an enemy of your enemy, and he's going to become your friend by default. And then the question is, does he eventually become your enemy, or are you able to influence him? And by him, I mean the role. I don't mean the individual person, because we're talking probably generations of development here. But are you able to influence that Caesar, whatever the form is, whoever he is, however, are you able to influence him in the direction of your own values? And how do you do that? You do that by being Kingpilled, by putting yourself in the position economically, socially, culturally, and spiritually, to be able to have the greatest influence possible on your society and whatever structure it winds up at.
Always be selling.
Just to build on that, right? Because like I think this is so what led me to this kind of realization. I oftentimes have instincts or impulses that I have to kind of figure out like downstream of it. But one of the things that kind of was the aha moment to me was the idea that we are all Orthodox. Well, on our death, right? One of the Orthodox ideas of death is on our death, we'll be impelled by the living embrace of God. And the question is how closely aligned we are to that spirit. The closer we are aligned to that spirit, the more we will accept that spirit and be in heaven, right? Be in accord to it. The further we are from that spirit, we'll be in hell, right? It's all one love. It's all one thing. So it's not a derivation. It's not like two separate things that we are existing in. It's more of like, what have you, where how have you healed your soul? How have you incorporated yourself to the whole? And the closer you are to the whole, the better you will be.
When you encounter God, do you experience his love as heaven or hell?
Exactly. Right. And I think that's if we take that to a materialistic realm, it's like when we're presented with this collapse, with this apocalypse, we are an apocalypse. All things hidden shall be revealed, right? What's amazing to me, and we've covered this on the show with Mark on the weekly show quite a bit, is how amazed I am how they're just telling the truth because they can't help themselves. It's not a ploy. It's not a design. They're not telling the truth because of a reason. There's no 4D chess here. They're doing it because they're compelled to do it, and there's a metaphysical compulsion to the truth, where all these things are being revealed. We can say it's hubris. We can say it's all things. I think it's actual because we're in this predictable period of apocalypse, where all things will be revealed, and as they're being revealed, then it's up to us to accept it, or reject it, or to build with it, or to do whatever you want with it. But the facts are the facts. Like I'm very, very curious of how we're going to start incorporating some of these things. I think we're in this weird nowhere zone where we haven't really dealt with these things yet, but these things are being dealt with. Like these things are nascent. Like you're going to have to deal with COVID. Like it's going to happen. You're going to deal with vaccine deaths. You're going to deal with it. Like these things are happening, and I want to see. I'm very curious to see how the modernist mind incorporates these ideas, because I think that's what's going to happen. It's either going to be rejection or incorporation, and I don't know which way Western man goes.
All right, so I wanted to connect something that Matt said. I don't want to turn this into like a post-libertarian thing, but one of the things that you had mentioned,
it already is.
I know anything that I do has that tilt to it. One of the things that you had mentioned was either you're going to like reject the power or you're going to find a way to incorporate it, and that's over the last like 8 to 10 months. That's been the thing that has caused me to disconnect from like libertarian politics, was this whole like neither right nor left, like identifying both as the same type of enemy. Like it's wrong. Like it's completely wrong. Like obviously, if you lived in a red state, even if you lived in a red state with the worst possible fucking governor you could imagine, like what's his name? Holcomb here in Indiana. Like he went full lockdown in 2020. Like he did not hold back at all. you would have almost thought that we had a Democrat governor. Just the way he locked everything down, and then he also closed all the schools, and then he also disbanded the state legislature and didn't let them come back into session. Like, he just declared totalitarian emergency power and canceled everything and said, I'm the king dick and I get to say what goes on. And he took a full leftist tilt on it. Even with that being the case, I had an infinitely better life than anybody who lived in New York or California or even fucking right across the state lines in Illinois. Like, even with that. So like, if you can come out of 2020 and 2021 and say, okay, the left and the right are both equally the bad guy, like, your brain is damaged. I don't know what else to say. Like, and in with that, like, when you look at Masters, especially when you look at Masters in both pieces, really, like both the Mother Jones and the New York Times piece, like, they dig into his college, like, libertarian days and a lot of the things that he was writing and saying and thinking at that time. And you see the progression.
When he was 5 years old, they moved to a golf course.
I mean, that's literally in one of the, I think that's in the Mother Jones
Mother
piece.
Jones. Yeah.
Yeah, they literally say that.
To a gated community near a golf course where his father was a programmer, his mother was a educational. What the fuck are you talking about?
But like, when you look at his progression, like you were saying at the beginning, Matt, like, it's the same progression that I went through over the last 2.5 years, 2 years. Shit, not even that.
Dude, when I was reading the Mother Jones point, I was like, hey Matt, this you? Like, it's like Matt, are you Blake Masters? Matt, are you Blake Masters? I had a very kids in the hall
yes,
kind of moment.
Carlos, I would say that coming out of 9/11, the right absolutely got it wrong. But if you had asked me, on 9/12 or 10/12, if the right got it wrong, no.
Okay, but define the right though. Hang on, wait.
That's what I was
define the right. Define the right. So here's the most amazing thing that's happened to me over the last. Jordan Peterson, Curtis Yarvin, even I'll put Cyprian in there, and Matt and a few other people, and then where I'm at right now. My idea of what the right is completely different than I think what normie conservative anything wants to consider right. Like, I look at most people who say I'm on the right. I'm like, no, you're not. You're
right.
not.
When I was in college and was the youngest county representative at the state Republican convention in Kentucky in 2004, what I considered the right at that time is a completely different thing from what I consider the right today, and completely different thing from what the right actually is today. In fact, like, they're
okay. You know, let's do this right now. Let's define the right between the three of us. What is the right? What is a functional definition of right wing? And I'm not talking like fantasy politics or fantasy, whatever. I'm talking like what is a functional reality? What we sell normies of the right is, because I think what most people think the right is just conservative, and that's not what we're talking about. And we're not, and then they go, well, you're talking about far right fascism. No, right? It's like talking about monarchy to most people. And I've had this happen. Where people go, well, you're talking about dictatorship. I'm like, no. Well, no, yes, and yes. Like, kind of, but no, but yes.
Well, and that's like when Carlos brings this up, saying the right and the left, like emergency powers, both use it for different reasons, but they're wrong. Okay, but if we want to take just strictly off of that, if we look at the two very, like, glaring examples of the right and the left using emergency powers and using it wrong, the right used emergency powers in the situation of a terrorist attack, regardless of what history may have told us actually happened on that day. The right used the power in response to a terrorist attack to secure the country from outside threat. The left used largely, I mean, yes, Trump was in the White House at the time, and we can go into semantics of how much outside influences had on him with what his COVID response was. But if you look at the worst states in terms of response to COVID, and then you push forward and look at 2021, and as soon as Biden came into office, the way that the Democrats responded to COVID, pushing through the entirety of 2021, like the way that they used their power, that wasn't about keeping people safe. That was about expanding their power and pushing their own influence and force on people to do whatever the fuck they said because they said it. Not it did it, like they didn't even have they pretended to have the pretense of safety, but it was never about that.
Let's cut through
never
this.
Anything that resembled safety in what the Democrats did. So,
but again, we're still with it. We're still in a liberal frame. Let's cut through this, right? Let's go to is and ought, right? Let's say that right wing, and I'm not, and I, again, ultimately this comes down to a value statement. I'm going to try to divorce it from an absolute value statement, because then people go, well, you're just championing one over. Let's say the right wing is and the left wing is ought, and we can make an argument for both, right? Both can be valuable in their own place, but the is right now is winning out over the oughts because the is prescient. The is like, I'm deciding to pay for gas or food today. That's the is. And that's why the right wing that's why the insurgency, or let's say the pendulum is swinging to the right wing, for lack of a better word, because the actuality, the lived reality, not the theoretical wondering what could be, but the actual is of the moment is right wing. And that's, while I think we're going to see multiple models of Donald Trump was just one derivation, and I think Donald Trump was still very much Hollywood and very much produced. As we start getting towards much more authentic versions of this, and JD Vance is one more derivation. Ivy League, still very much elite, but now talking pleb, right? Talking is. What is the situation on the ground? What is? Because what, again, the bitter white pill for me is that they're still using these mechanisms. If elections meant nothing, literally nothing at all, they wouldn't do this. Putin doesn't do this. Putin doesn't make shows like Hillary Clinton's doing, like of being a firefighter and like being like the first woman. Like Putin wouldn't do that. Like it would never even cross his fucking mind to do that. Because he's like, no, I am power. I am power. I do. Right? Xi Jinping, I am power. I do. Stalin, I am power. I do. Everything flows from me. I don't give a shit what you think. I do. And that's what's going to start happening in the West. I think you're going to start seeing, and no matter how much the liberal idea is to disperse enough power to the institutions that everyone gets fed with that power. The right wing idea is to concentrate that power where we starve out all the lesser beings, right? Where it's like, no, one person gets fed. This is the trough. This is where it's going, and fuck everyone else. That's left-right distinction now, for lack of a better better terminology. So the only question about what's left, what's right, is the person you're saying is right wing, are they going to take complete and total control, or aren't they? If they're not, and this is what Yarvin's talking about, there's completely hyper legal ways for the executive to take control of the Fed and all these other things. If they're not doing that, then they're not right wing. There's something else.
I'd say that in the history of America, there's been very little right-wing energy. America was founded as a radically left-wing country relative to its time, and it continued that way for the majority of its history. I'd say probably the least like influence that any sort of right wing thing has ever had on it was from the mid 60s, 70s up until now, essentially. There's been no right wing energy to speak of whatsoever. So like the 9/11 response wasn't a right wing thing. This was um, this was one faux left wing, one faux right wing party, both captured by a single globalist ideology that was setting them up as ostensible enemies, but really just to create the appearance of some kind of a debate or back and forth when there really was none. The outcome was predetermined. And this is a product of the rise of the national security state coupled with the real big propaganda machine that built out of the CIA and everything through the 70s, 80s, 90s. Like Americans didn't realize they were possessed in the way that they were possessed, and many of them still don't. They don't, like, they've been living in an artificial reality for decades. So yeah, there has been no big right-wing influence on America for at the least decades. I'd say closer to centuries. And what we're seeing now is kind of the beginnings of kind of a building of energy around these kinds of ideas. I mean, we're talking about like centralization to the level of monarchy. That's something that hasn't been talked about in America for a long time.
Well, like to that, like the propaganda type stuff. Like all three of us at some point in our youth knew that the Middle East was a threat to attack the U.S. at some point. Like it was going to happen. We knew that it was going to happen because we had been propagandized, whether it was Reagan, Bush, Clinton,
Sam Harris.
we knew that the attack was coming. We knew that they were going to come after us at some point. Like, and honestly, if you look like historically, and I know like Scott Horton and plenty of others have talked ad infinitum about this. Like, if we just left them the fuck alone to their own devices, like they'd have just spent 50 years killing each other off, and we'd have never even been like on their radar at all. And
you know, the biggest mistake that the Americans made there was, I'll just say this quick, the biggest mistake that the Americans made in those countries was not explicitly ruling them. They went in and they ruled them while pretending that they didn't. That's what sparked the blowback. If they'd gone in and they occupied them and they ruled them and they said, you are a satellite state for us, we're the ones who run the show, we're the ones who are in power, they would have been like, all right. Like go ask the average person on the streets of India or something today what they think of Britain. They're like, they're downright Anglophiles. They were like, you guys, your thing is great. Like we want to be like America. We want to be like the West. That's how. If you explicitly ruled them, then they wouldn't resent you for it. But America didn't explicitly rule them. They propped up fake rulers and undermined the rest of the structures of their society, and that's why all the resentment and everything was there.
Well, also the fact that piss ass nothing Protestantism leads to an automatic rejection in the Muslim world. If you take a much more hardcore, even Roman Catholic or Orthodox stance, one of the most amazing things that has happened over the last 2 years of being of me reintroducing myself to the Orthodox Church and accepting Orthodoxy is noticing how similar we are to Islam, and how the connections to Islam are not, I mean, again, this, that, the other, but fundamentally we're the same. And fundamentally we can build those roads. And we can say, hey, my brother's my brother. We can, yeah, okay, fine. We can have these disagreements, but I don't care, because what we're trying to build is a principled order of being, right? To create being in this world, which again is my crossroads over to Evola, is that being is outside of time. That being right? Whether you ascribe it to Judaism or Orthodoxy or whatever have you, doesn't matter to me so much as the actual essence of being. That is supernatural. That is metaphysical. That is something that is of us and beyond us at the same time. That's what we're building towards. That's the kingdom of God. All other things are temporal and meaningless. It's like, okay, sure, right wing, left wing, we're voting this guy, what, who gives a shit? Like, it's like, are we deepening people's commitment to the essence of humanity, of being, or aren't we? If we're not, then everything else to that left hand path, or everything else that is not that, can be excluded out of hand. Those things are not of us. And that's kind of what I was getting to, where I was like, I almost don't want these people to incorporate some of these ideas because they're not ready. Like, it might work in a materialistic political frame, but it doesn't work on a spiritual frame, and it doesn't work in my frame. Like, I'm happy to support anyone on a yeah, we'll vote this and we'll get these things passed, so my kid doesn't have to get, you know, become a zipper chest, but which is a immediate concern to me. But as a spiritual longevity legacy concern, I don't give a shit. Like, you're part of this or you're not. Like, it's like there's a much bigger thing happening. As my daughter is making noise in the background.
That is beautiful singing, as far as I'm concerned.
It's much better rap than Clint's ever capable of. So.
I say it's better than Blake Masters' rap too. That was pretty bad.
Yeah. If we're gonna,
it's my liturgy, man. It's my Saturday liturgy.
If we're gonna talk about bad raps, yeah, like Masters kind of had it figured out.
I didn't see the Masters rap. However, I have seen the Clint Russell fucking. What was it? What is it? He's like.
The National Convention.
I erased that from my memory.
Yeah. Well, it's remnants remain. Their derivations, derivations remain in my brain. So.
Yeah, the Masters rap was pretty bad, but his writing was pretty good, so he can be forgiven. Man, like, we've gotten into a lot of stuff that's a lot deeper than what I had initially expected with just the general conversation here. Let's kind of bring it back a little.
Go deeper.
I can't take that, because I think that's going to be the tagline for Mark Claire's new show. So
deeper.
We're gonna let him hold on to that for now, since that's all he's got going for him.
He needs to cut that. Just get Jason going deeper.
Let's bring it back around to Masters. Just
it's my answer to Adam Patrick, actually, because Adam was sent me a message like, do you want to go deeper? I'm like, deeper, Adam. We go deeper.
I just saw in my memories my episode with him about a year ago just popped up within the last couple of days, and that was actually a decent conversation. We talked about some pretty cool stuff. So with Masters, how do y'all feel about just looking at the primary, or the way the primary went, and then how the general election is kind of going to go? Apparently, Carlos has got a lube now, so
really?
If you're going to be going that much deeper, you probably need to invest in some Paloma Verde lube. Go over to palomaverde.com and check that out.
PalomaVerdeCBD.com.
CBD.com. I'm not sure what the discount will be for the lube, but if you send Carlos an email, he will let you know. I'm sure.
It's like 10 to 20%.
So what are y'all thinking on Masters in terms of how the primary went initially, and then how the general is going to go? I know we talked about kind of the polling and how that's looking is pretty, polling wise, it looks to be kind of dead even. So number one, does he win? And number two, if he wins, what does that mean?
My prediction is that he, in a straight up election, he would win, but it's not going to be a straight up election, and he's going to lose with very blatant, clear examples of, shall we say, voter squad, and that's going to be a flashpoint. That's what I'm anticipating.
Do you think that's still going to be? Do you think that that's still going to rear its head in Arizona? Like they had done quite a bit, but I know with Carrie Lake there was some chicanery going on in terms of her primary and stuff. But like, is that still going to be a major issue in the general election, even after the stuff that they've done over the last year and a half or so?
Mail-in ballots are the magical gift from God, right? Like you can send as many ballots in. Who knows? Like I don't think any election has been legitimate, really, ever. I think you're always using outside. No, but I'm serious. I'm not even.
No, I did an episode on this where I said I don't think anything since Dwight Eisenhower was actually legit. Like
once you have the media on board, I would go,
maybe JFK. And like JFK and Trump, I think were the only two that had.
We talking about JFK was elected, but was put in by the mafia. I watched the Irishman. I know what's going on.
Yeah, but I consider that legitimate. Like he was put in by people outside of
who had legitimate concerns. Hey,
long live the mafia!
Money. Hey,
he was put in by people other than those in the direct establishment. Like he wasn't the establishment choice. He was the mafia choice. Like that's why I consider it a legitimate.
And now, as my co-host Mark says, like that the majority just merged with the mafia, and the two things are the same thing. So it's all the mafia choice now. I think all elections are both illegitimate and legitimate at the same time. They're illegitimate because they're usually made by illegitimate means. If you have a media apparatus, if you have any kind of way of influencing votes, it becomes illegitimate. At the same time, it's legitimate because the office itself is legitimate. So as long as the presidency is considered as a legitimate position, it's legitimate. You got it there. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter how you got it. It matters that you're there.
Right. If you lost, that is because you didn't play dirty enough.
Right. Right. Sure, and fair enough. That being said, like, so again, this goes back to my statement is like I don't want them in my personal politics. I have two politics. I have the impersonal and the personal. The impersonal is sure, I have this advantage of being a Canadian living in Australia, where I don't have a Australian citizenship. I can't vote. I don't want to. It's a nice place to be. I don't care. I pay attention to the idea of like if they're sort of evicting Canadians, I'd start caring. But other than that, I don't give a shit.
If somebody ran on a platform of Canadians are going to be kicked out of Australia, then you're going to vote for the other guy.
But the thing is, I can't vote. So
sure, yeah.
Even though I'd be like, oh. Legally. That sounds bad.
Right.
Legally can't do anything about
it. Yeah, the way I see it is that, first of all, this is a big point for Masters in the primaries, that he hit on the incumbent, the Republican incumbent, or the other major Republican guy. I don't remember if he was he was an incumbent or what, but he hit on the other major Republican guy for being a squish on voter squad, and that was a big thing that got him on people's radar. So it's already a major issue for him. And then Arizona was like ground zero of some of the worst parts of it. And I don't see what the benefit would be in allowing him to be elected. I think that from the regime perspective, someone like him winning an election, being legitimized in a purple state would be just, think about that would be completely resetting the bar now, because once he's been elected, now you can say this guy is like openly talking about monarchy and like rubbing shoulders and tee-heeing with Uncle Ted, and he's getting elected. He's getting elected in a legitimate democratic vote, which is, I mean, the way that they would see it. That type of thing can't be allowed if they want to retain their own legitimacy and that sort of thing. Like, that's going to move the narrative forward faster than they can maintain it, in my opinion. So I don't see them allowing him to just get elected just all hunky-dory and, oh, well, we lost, I guess, we got to move on. I think that it's going to end up being a major flashpoint, because also, if he doesn't get elected, if he loses in a straight up election, then that's a big deal for the future of the movement that he's kind of spearheading right now. So they both have an incentive for that to become a flashpoint.
This points towards why Yarvin is doing the purple thing. Why is he going on Young Turks? Why is he making these overtures?
Right.
And what his one of his main messages has always been, we're not going to get rid of you. We're not going to kill you. We're not going to get we're not going to 86 you. We'll pay you off. Right?
It's going to be it's just peeling off people. Just peel people away from that core. Undermine their confidence just enough.
And why we need guys like Yarvin, and this is my point of saying, like, he's not us. Right, he's not talking to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm including you guys into me. Like, I agree. Whatever. But it's like he's not us, but we need him to tell them to not kill us, because what we're into, if we look at this into a Girardian sense, we've had this. So Girard has his idea of mimetic rivalry. The closer people are to each other, the more you're going to have a conflict, because they see themselves as the same, and then there becomes a conflict over resources, whatever have you. What we've seen over the last 20 years, especially, is that the elite class has been realized that they're not that elite. That there are people from like truck drivers like Tommy Salmons can do more research and can do more thinking and can outthink them and get more of a following. Joe Rogan is a classic example, right? Joe Rogan, meathead, barely finished college, but who gives a shit? MMA guy, comedian, has the most successful platform ever, outperforming everything. That they don't like. It's not that we're the problem. It's that we are the focal point of this division. They want a new division. They want to make sure the elites are the elites and everyone else is everyone else. And this is what we're seeing. It's a very clear example of why they're cutting off power to why they're charging £9,000 to the average cafe in Britain, because the elites don't give a shit about power costs. They don't pay that. They don't concept that. They just print more money and pay it. Like, that's the divide, and the divide is more important than anything else, because it plays into that mimetic rivalry, which is like, if you have, the closer you get to stasis, the more you have all against all violence, the more you're going to have all against all competition. They don't want all against all. They want all against one. So they'll scapegoat Trump, or they'll scapegoat these other guys. They'll put all the energy over to over here and say, all your problems are because of Putin, or because of Trump, or because of this, or because of that. The major problem we're having right now is there's no catharsis. So we blame Putin, but we kind of all know where our energy problems are coming from. We blame Trump. We all kind of know where our political problems are coming from. There's no catharsis. It's broken down. It's breaking, and it's becoming a problem for them. And that's where the inroad for Thiel and all the rest of them is becoming apparent, because they can go, well, there's another way. We don't blame anyone. We just harness that energy and create a new thing.
Yeah, that's the direction that I see things going, is not eventually some big all-out conflict, or kind of less dramatic than a lot of people are anticipating. what I'm kind of expecting is that there's going to be a gradual loss of credibility and competence among the regime, the central regime people right now, as they're just a loss of faith in them as they become very clearly like incompetent, strange, um, uh, rabid, weird ideologues, and people are just like, I don't want anything to do with this. You know, have at it, but we're good. And what's essential is that there be some kind of a competent, compelling, masculine alternative that people can turn to and say, you guys, I don't have a problem with you personally, but you're just kind of weird and I'm going to ride with these guys. And as long as that alternative is credible and deeply entrenched enough, then the people who are in it, who aren't necessarily rabid ideologues, who are just in it for the money, they're really just trying to increase their own wealth, power, and influence. They're going to notice the winds of change. They're going to notice when things shift, and you're going to just suddenly funding for certain projects isn't going to be there anymore, and there's going to be
and who better, and honestly, and who better than the Ubermensch who funded PayPal and Facebook and this and that and the other thing, who is here's the question: is Peter Thiel gay, or does he just fuck guys?
That's an interesting question.
Right?
Yeah.
No, I know. And initially, it's funny, but then you think about it, because were a lot of Caesars, was Augustine gay, or did he just fuck guys because he could? Because he could. I'm gonna fuck
was
you.
Was he just a pitcher and he'd
Mike
pitch to anyone
Tyson?
who'd
Mike
catch?
Tyson. I just stumbled upon this. It was an old clip from Joe Rogan, but Mike Tyson once made the comment, like, "I'm gonna fuck you till you love me," to a reporter, which is the most dominant alpha fucking statement you can possibly make to someone. But it puts you into that mind frame. It's like, are they homosexual? Is it out of love? All right. Are we talking about James Gentleman kind of thing? Or are we talking about an aggressor who's like, no, I'm gonna fuck you till you love me. I'm gonna fuck you because you don't want me fucking you. But I'm gonna fuck you.
I know I was part of a group chat somewhere that was brought up. It was like some guys just have that like mentality of like, I'm just going to straight up like literally fuck you to death, and like that's an interesting.
It's funny, he's like this soft spoken kind of nerdy guy with a bit of a poochy belly and stuff, and so then like is he hiding a rabid domination monster under there? I could see it.
I can see it. I mean, look, there's got to be.
Look at the things he's put his money into. Look at the things he's put his backing into. Like, the dude clearly is not dumb, and the dude clearly is. He is of a mentality to capitalize on the things that give him power, that give him money, that give him influence, that put him in a position to fuck whatever he wants.
And that please him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting.
Because a pleasure model, and this is the biggest. I think this is the biggest decoupling from the last 300 years we have to address, is the pleasure model of the libertine, or liberalism is based on libertine. Like, came out of it's a more formal, dressed up, acceptable version of the libertine kind of mindset, which is vitality, which is vitalism, which is this sort of positive nihilism, this idea of all that is the body is good, and we should absolve all sins through the body. Pleasure is great. We see this in fascism. We see this is the big connection, right? This is the overarching connection. We say it's liberalism, but I think it's deeper than liberalism. It's not just liberalism. It's vitalism. We're going back to Genesis 3. We're going back to where these terms didn't exist, and this spirit constantly shows up and inhabits these forms. So it's not communism that's the problem. It's the spirit that inhabits communism. It's the spirit that inhabits fascism. It's liberalism itself. When this is my pushback against Adam Patrick. Sorry, Adam, but I don't think that the Enlightenment was a mistake. It's just a transference of energy. It's where the energy goes. We can say it's Gnosticism. We can say it's this. We can say it's that. That's all true and valid. It's all true and valid. But the spirit behind it is not incumbent to these forms. So even if we squash out communism, we kill fascism, we kill these forms, the spirit remains, and we'll take a new host. And this we go, well, we have to destroy the spirit. It's like, no, you don't. You have to accept it. You have to move past it. You have to build a process that protects you and your progeny as much as you can from it. You have to cast out demons and devils as much as you can, but also realize that this is part of the process, and we are part of this. It's
so. I think that's one of the things that the purist libertarians don't seem to understand whenever we, like, from a more post-libertarian type of a position, start talking about like power and the way that sort of stuff works. Is like you never remove power, you never crush it. Like, it just transfers from one to another. Like, it's the concept of energy. It's always going to exist. You're never going to destroy it. It's just going to transfer to the next available host. I feel like I know Matt's got to get out of here, so I want to kind of wrap up a little bit and
stay in.
Let's get him out of here, and we may have to do a follow up and talk a little bit more about this, especially with
the Palo Verde lube.
The idea of the transfer of power and the way that kind of works, especially the way we're seeing it work in modern society and stuff like that. So yeah, be sure to head over to PalomaVerdeCBD.com and get all of your powered lube. And then Matt,
promo code King.
Wait. This is, honestly, Matt, you should maybe stretch out to Adam for this, because I think this is, Adam and I are having these cross conversations on Twitter. And I honestly think Adam might think I'm an idiot, and he's not wrong, but I think this is the overarching theme. Like, this is how we get out of this into orthodoxy, like into true. What is true orthodoxy? Not just a belief or a system or a practice, but a nous, like an actual worldview that we can inhabit, right, and we can live, and yet understand there's this other thing happening that we are in parallel to. This is parallel mimesis. This is where we are in two worlds, right, two realities that accept each other as absolute realities, but are operating in different ways. It doesn't. I think I'm trying to make that make sense, and I'm probably failing horribly, but because I'm having mimosas without orange juice. Whatever. But anyways, yeah. Say your thing. We'll sign out.
Yeah. I'm tracking with you. I think that this is an interesting angle to go. I've had a couple interesting conversations recently with Josiah about shout out Josiah Bartlett, Sudoku Pull-Up Bureau on Twitter. I've had a couple of interesting conversations about symphonia and the relationship between the church and the state, and the ideal form of that relationship and how they relate to one another. And as typically, if you're having a conversation with Josiah, you're getting off into some pretty trippy spaces. So that's where it's gone. But yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting ground here for more conversation. We should definitely do it again.
Well, if y'all can't talk Adam into coming on to do a continuation of this look at power and how that works, especially looking at maybe from an Orthodox and Christian perspective, Josiah might be an excellent fourth for this. He's never been on the show before. I've interacted with him some in our chats, and also on.
He's lucrative. He's like an eel in
So I've interacted with him some on our chats and also on Twitter. So I think he would definitely be a good addition to the show. In the meantime, hope everybody has enjoyed this and gotten something out of it. And if you don't mind, be sure to leave us some comments or tell us what direction to take part 2, because as I learned with the discussion on the new right with Matt and Don the Pleb, part 2 goes in whole other directions and is even more interesting than part 1. So give us some feedback on this one. Tell us what you want to hear on part 2. And we will pick this up again here in a couple weeks as soon as we can get schedules worked out for everybody. And in the meantime, have a great one, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thank you.